Within the polished oak jury box of Manhattan's federal courthouse, Zariah Cole vanished in plain sight. A quiet black woman in a gray hoodie, she absorbed the mockery from Todd Wilson and Margot Fairchild, like shadows absorb light. Their whispers, about her intelligence, their smirks at her silence, all perfect cover as she studied the high-profile espionage case against tech CEO James Ellison. They never noticed how her posture shifted when military schematics appeared on screen, or how a court guard offered her a respectful nod that belonged to someone of rank. The jury had no idea they were sharing space with a former Navy SEAL captain whose classified mission ended in betrayal and death 3 years ago, a mission now mysteriously connected to this very courtroom. Zariah's carefully constructed invisibility would shatter the moment Admiral Parnell entered and addressed the woman they had judged so carelessly. "Captain Cole, stand down." The United States District Court for the Southern District of New York buzzed with anticipation. Camera crews clustered outside like hungry predators, microphones extended toward anyone entering or exiting the imposing stone building. This wasn't just any trial. It was the case that dominated every headline, news segment, and dinner conversation across America. James Ellison, the boyish-faced CEO of Quantum Shield Technologies, sat at the defense table in an impeccably tailored Navy suit. At 42, his once celebrated status as a tech wunderkind had crumbled under the weight of accusations that would make Benedict Arnold seem like a mere prankster. Espionage and national security breaches that allegedly handed critical defense technology to foreign powers. As the 14 selected jurors filed into the courtroom for the first time, all eyes tracked their movements. The group represented a cross-section of New York society, diverse in age, background, and demeanor. The judge had warned them about the media attention, but nothing prepared them for the suffocating scrutiny they now faced. Juror number 4, Todd Wilson, strode confidently to his seat. A corporate attorney with Blackwell and Hayes, his Italian leather shoes gleamed under the fluorescent lights. Beside him, juror number 9, Margot Fairchild, adjusted her designer silk scarf with manicured fingers that sparkled with tasteful diamonds. They exchanged knowing glances, people who recognized their own kind. Near the back of the jury box sat juror number 12, a woman who seemed determined to disappear into her seat. Zariah Cole pulled her gray hoodie slightly forward, creating a partial shadow over her face. Unlike the others who had arrived in business casual attire or better, she wore dark jeans, simple sneakers, and that ever-present hoodie. At 34, her face carried a quiet intensity that most mistook for timidity. Her dark skin was unblemished, her eyes alert despite their downcast focus. When Judge Harold Brennan asked the jurors to introduce themselves briefly, the others spoke of careers, education, neighborhoods. Todd mentioned his Harvard law degree. Margot casually referenced her charity foundation. When Zariah's turn came, her voice was soft but clear. "Zariah Cole. I work in security consulting." That was all. No elaboration, no personal details. The brevity of her response drew a poorly concealed smirk from Todd. During the first break, as jurors gathered in their private room, Todd wasted no time establishing himself as the alpha. "I'm thinking we should establish a process early on," he announced, loosening his tie. "Since I've had experience with complex litigation, I could help guide our discussions." Several jurors nodded, intimidated by his confidence. "Good idea," Margot chimed in, opening her designer purse to retrieve a compact mirror. "This case has so many technical aspects. It helps to have someone who understands legal jargon." Their eyes drifted to Zariah, who sat quietly by the window, a small notebook open on her lap. She wrote something, her penmanship neat and precise. "What about you?" Todd asked her directly, his tone falsely conversational. "Do you have any experience with technology or legal proceedings, Zariah?" She looked up, briefly meeting his gaze. "Some." Todd exchanged glances with Margot, who rolled her eyes when she thought Zariah wasn't looking. "Well," Todd continued loudly, "for those who might be struggling to follow, I'm happy to explain things. Not everyone has a background in these matters." A few jurors chuckled. grateful to be included in what they perceived as the smarter circle. They returned to the courtroom. Todd whispered to Margot, "I bet she's only here because they needed diversity picks. Probably doesn't understand half of what's happening." Margot nodded. "The hoodie says it all. Did you see her shoes? I wonder if she even owns proper clothes." What they didn't notice was the slight stiffening in Zariah's shoulders, the almost imperceptible tightening of her grip on her notebook. She heard everything. Throughout the afternoon, Claire Whitman, the lead prosecutor, delivered her opening statement with practiced precision. Tall, blonde, and razor-sharp, she painted Ellison as a traitor who sold America's cybersecurity secrets for profit. "Mr. Ellison didn't just breach trust," Whitman declared, her voice carrying throughout the courtroom. "He breached our national defense systems, exposing critical infrastructure to foreign attacks." Zariah watched the prosecutor intently, her eyes occasionally darting to the defendant, then to the evidence displays. When a technical diagram flashed on the screen showing encryption protocols, something changed in her posture. She sat straighter, her focus intensifying. As the diagram remained displayed, a court security guard with military bearing passed near the jury box. His eyes briefly met Zariah's, and he gave her an almost imperceptible nod of respect. The exchange lasted less than a second, but juror number 6, a retired teacher named Sarah, noticed the odd interaction. Later, as the jurors discussed initial impressions, Todd dominated the conversation. "The prosecutor's case seems strong," he announced. "The encryption evidence alone shows clear intent." Several jurors nodded along, but Zariah quietly spoke up. "The diagram showed SHA 256 protocols, but the indictment mentions quantum-resistant algorithms." The room fell silent, surprised by her sudden contribution. Todd recovered quickly. "Well, yes, but that's a minor technical detail. It's the difference between current commercial systems and classified military ones," Zariah replied softly, then fell silent again. Todd's face reddened. "Let's not get bogged down in technicalities that most of us aren't equipped to understand." The slight was obvious. Several jurors looked uncomfortably at Zariah, but she had already returned to her notebook, seemingly unbothered. As the first day concluded, the jurors filed out of the courthouse through a private exit to avoid the press. While waiting for the elevator, a Navy veteran who had been watching from the public gallery passed by. He stopped suddenly, his eyes widening as they landed on Zariah. For a moment, he stared, recognition clear on his weathered face. Then, noticing others watching, he quickly looked away and continued walking. Sarah, juror number 6, frowned slightly at the interaction. It was the second time today someone had given Zariah an unusual look. In the elevator, Todd couldn't resist one final jab. "Big day tomorrow. We'll be diving into technical evidence. Hope everyone can keep up with the encryption concepts," he said, looking directly at Zariah. "Probably hard for some people to understand how it all works." Zariah didn't respond, but in her notebook she wrote something and underlined it twice. Ellison didn't design the protocols he allegedly sold. For a brief moment as the elevator descended, her mind flashed to another place. A memory of rough ocean waves, a voice shouting commands through howling wind, the feel of tactical gear against her skin. Then the elevator doors opened, pulling her back to the present. The quiet woman in the hoodie walked away alone, leaving the others to their assumptions. By the third day of trial, patterns had formed. The jurors arrived each morning, took their assigned seats, and settled in for hours of testimony. Todd Wilson had established himself as the unofficial jury spokesman, while Margot Fairchild kept close as his elegant echo. Most other jurors fell somewhere in the middle, attentive but passive, happy to follow Todd's lead. And then there was Zariah Cole. The woman in the hoodie remained an island unto herself. That morning, Marcus Bradley, the defense attorney representing James Ellison, was clearly struggling. Visibly sleep-deprived and disorganized, he fumbled through cross-examination of a government cybersecurity expert. "So to confirm, Mr. Reynolds, the code in question couldn't possibly have been accessed through my client's terminals." The witness shifted uncomfortably. "Well, not through standard protocols, but—" "So you agree it's impossible?" Bradley interrupted triumphantly. No, that's not what I— Thank you, no further questions. Zariah's brow furrowed. She visibly flinched at Bradley's mistake. He had just cut off what might have been crucial. Context. As the lawyer returned to his seat looking pleased, Zariah's pen moved rapidly across her notebook. That night, in her modest one-bedroom apartment in Queens, Zariah spread her notes across a small kitchen table. The space was spartanly furnished, functional rather than decorative. No photos adorned the walls, no trinkets or mementos. It was the home of someone who never fully unpacked. Under the single overhead light, her notes revealed themselves as far more than casual observations. Page after page contained detailed diagrams of encryption structures, notations in military shorthand, and connections drawn between seemingly unrelated testimonies. Her handwriting was precise, almost architectural, in its clarity. She worked methodically, triangulating witness statements against the evidence presented. When she came to notes about the defense lawyer's misstep, she circled it twice and wrote, "Bradley missed that remote Terminal 5 had a back door. Intentional oversight? Check defense witness list for name Harrison." A memory surfaced unexpectedly, a flashback so vivid she could feel the desert heat. She was younger, lying perfectly still on scorching sand, a sniper rifle stabilized before her. Through the scope, a target 200 meters away. A digital counter ticked in her peripheral vision as an instructor's voice cut through her concentration. Charter. Seconds too slow, Cole. In the field, that's the difference between mission success and body bags. She adjusted, recalibrated, focused. The next shot was perfect. Distance, wind calculation, timing. The hard-faced instructor, Admiral Wallace, nodded once. It was the closest thing to approval anyone ever received from him. The memory dissolved as Zariah returned to her notes, rubbing her eyes. Something about this case felt wrong, manufactured somehow. The pieces fit too neatly in some places, while gaping holes existed in others. The next day, tensions in the jury room escalated during lunch break. Todd had been pushing, his theory that Ellison's guilt was obvious, while Margot nodded emphatically beside him. "The evidence speaks for itself," Todd insisted, gesturing with his fork. The encryption keys were on his personal drive. "But we haven't heard the full defense yet," Sarah, the retired teacher, pointed out. "Please," Margot scoffed. "What defense? Could possibly explain encrypted military files on his laptop? He's guilty." Zariah sat silently, eating her sandwich while the others debated. Her silence had become so expected that several jurors forgot she was there until Todd decided to draw her in. "What do you think, Zariah? Too complicated for you?" His tone was falsely sweet. The room quieted, uncomfortable with his transparent condescension. Zariah placed her sandwich down, meeting his eyes directly for the first time. "Maybe I just don't waste words." The simplicity and quiet confidence of her response left Todd momentarily speechless. Before he could recover, they were called back to the courtroom. That afternoon, during the technical testimony of a systems engineer, something unexpected happened. The courtroom display suddenly flickered, and for approximately 3 seconds, a classified diagram appeared on screen before the court technician hastily removed it. While most jurors merely looked confused, Zariah's entire demeanor changed. Her eyes narrowed, and she sat forward slightly. The diagram hadn't appeared by accident. It contained sections of a military communications protocol that shouldn't have been accessible to the prosecution. Judge Brennan called for a brief recess to address the technical error. As jurors filed out, a uniformed bailiff brushed past Zariah, discreetly pressing something into her hand. Once in the restroom, alone in a stall, she unfolded the small paper. "It's bigger than this trial. Be careful." She stared at it for a long moment, then flushed it down the toilet. When court resumed, Zariah began watching the spectators more than the proceedings. In the third row, she spotted a man in a charcoal suit who hadn't been there before. He was taking notes, but his eyes occasionally drifted to the jury box, specifically to her. After court adjourned for the day, Zariah approached the clerk's desk while other jurors headed for the exit. "Excuse me," she said quietly. Is there a public log of courtroom visitors? The clerk, a young man with horn-rimmed glasses, looked up with mild surprise. That's not typically available to jurors. I understand, Zariah replied. But I recognize someone who might be connected to the case. I'm sorry, but rules are rules, the clerk said dismissively, turning back to his computer. Zariah hesitated, then pulled out her notebook, opening it to reveal a small symbol drawn in the corner, a trident crossed with an arrow. The clerk's eyes widened slightly as he recognized the classified military insignia. Where did you... he began, then stopped himself. His face paled. I'll have to check with the judge about that request. As Zariah walked away, she noted, the clerk immediately picking up his phone, hands slightly trembling. She'd made a calculated risk by showing the symbol, but she needed to confirm who was watching the trial. And who was watching her. That night, Todd confronted her directly in the courthouse parking garage. He had clearly been waiting, leaning against a concrete pillar as she walked toward her modest sedan. What's your game, Cole? He demanded, blocking her path. Excuse me? Don't play dumb. This quiet, mysterious act. The way you suddenly know things about military encryption. You're trying to make the rest of us look stupid. Zariah regarded him calmly. I'm just doing my civic duty as a juror. Bullshit, Todd spat. You think you're special? I checked. Security. Consultant doesn't make you a tech expert. You researched me? Zariah's voice remained level, but something dangerous flickered in her eyes. Just enough to know you're putting on an act, Todd replied, stepping closer. What's with the hoodie? Anyway, trying to look tough? For a moment, Zariah said nothing. Then very quietly, you should stop now. Something in her tone, a steel quality that hadn't been there before, made Todd hesitate. He blinked, suddenly unsure. Whatever, he finally muttered, stepping aside. Just know I'm watching you. As he walked away, Zariah remained still, her face betraying nothing. But internally, alarm bells were ringing. If an arrogant civilian like Todd was digging into her background, others would be too. Others with far more resources and dangerous intentions. That night, Zariah dreamed of her last mission. In vivid detail, she saw herself in full tactical gear, night vision activated, leading a team of 4 other SEALs through enemy territory. The familiar weight of her weapon, the sound of controlled breathing through comms, the hand signals directing movement through hostile terrain. In the dream, as in reality, she was Captain Zariah Cole, one of the first female commanders of a SEAL Special Operations Unit. Respected, feared, trusted with missions no one could know existed. She woke suddenly at 3:17 a.m., drenched in sweat. The memories weren't just dreams. They were warnings. Someone had recognized her in that courtroom. Someone knew who she really was. And if that was true, she was no longer just a juror in a high-profile trial. She was a target. The next morning, Claire Whitman presented what she called conclusive evidence of Ellison's guilt, a series of encrypted messages allegedly sent from his personal device to foreign contacts. These communications, Whitman declared, contain embedded fragments of classified military code that could only have been accessed by someone with Mr. Ellison's clearance and position. Zariah studied the evidence carefully. Something felt off about the timestamps, the sequence of the messages. They were too perfect, too linear. Real covert communications were messy, with gaps and redundancies. These looked manufactured. During the lunch break, Sarah approached Zariah cautiously. I noticed something strange yesterday, the retired teacher said, keeping her voice low. That man who stared at you in the hallway, he looked like he knew you. Zariah took a sip of water. I have one of those faces. No, Sarah persisted gently. It was more than that. And the guard who nodded at you on the first day. I taught for 30 years. I noticed things. For a moment, Zariah considered, brushing her off. Instead, she asked, What else have you noticed, Sarah? The older woman sat beside her. That you know more about this case than you're letting on. That you're carrying something heavy. She paused. My son served 2 tours in Afghanistan. I recognize that look. Zariah's expression remained neutral, but a decision was forming behind her eyes. Sarah might be a potential ally, someone observant enough to help her piece together what was really happening in this courtroom. The defense is being set up, Zariah said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. This whole trial is a cover for something bigger. Sarah's eyes widened slightly. How do you know that? Before Zariah could answer, Todd's voice boomed across the room. What are you two whispering about? Planning to actually contribute to the discussion today, Zariah? The moment was broken. Zariah stood gathering her things. Thank you for your concern, Sarah. But it's probably best if you keep your distance from me for now. As they returned to the courtroom, Zariah noticed something that sent a chill through her body. The court clerk who had reacted so strongly to her military symbol was absent. In his place sat a stern-faced woman who watched Zariah with undisguised suspicion. By the end of the day, Zariah's certainty had solidified into conviction. This wasn't just a trial about corporate espionage or even national security. This was about covering up something much darker, something connected to her past, to her team, to the mission that had ended her military career. And somehow, impossibly, James Ellison, the tech CEO she'd been assigned to help judge, was a pawn in the same game that had destroyed her life 3 years ago. That night, as Zariah reviewed her notes yet again, connecting more dots, a text message appeared on her burner phone. They know who you are. Court records accessed. Watch your 6. M. Monroe, her former communications specialist. The only other survivor from that night. She replied with a single word. Confirmed. Then she reached under her bed, pulling out a metal case secured with a biometric lock. Inside lay the remnants of her former life. Service medals she never displayed, dog tags she couldn't bear to wear, and a tactical knife that had saved her life more than once. Tomorrow would be different. Tomorrow, Captain Zariah Cole would stop hiding. Morning light filtered through the courthouse windows as jurors settled into their seats for day 5 of the trial. Zariah adjusted her hoodie, which she now wore like armor rather than camouflage. The subtle shift in her demeanor hadn't gone unnoticed. Sarah gave her a concerned glance, while Todd watched her with suspicious eyes. A new face appeared in the back row of the courtroom, a grizzled man in his 50s with salt and pepper hair and a pronounced limp. He sat quietly, his weathered hands resting on a walking cane. To most, he was just another spectator in the high-profile case, but when his fingers began tapping a distinct rhythm against his knee, tap-tap, pause, tap-tap-tap, Zariah's shoulders tensed imperceptibly. The cadence wasn't random. It was a SEAL team recognition signal, one specific to her former unit. Prosecutor Claire Whitman approached the bench, her confidence radiating with each click of her heels against the marble floor. Your Honor, the prosecution would like to introduce a new piece of evidence that has just been cleared by national security. Judge Brennan frowned. Ms. Whitman, you know the rules about late evidence. This is exceptional, Your Honor. A digital file recovered from a secondary server that conclusively links the defendant to foreign intelligence. After a heated sidebar with both attorneys, the judge reluctantly allowed the evidence. A digital file appeared on the courtroom screens, a audio mission brief with heavy redactions. Most of the text was blacked out, but the document header and a signature line at the bottom remained visible. Zariah's fingers gripped the edge of her seat. The document format was painfully familiar. It was a modified version of her own mission, brief from 3 years ago. Someone had altered it, removing classified elements while preserving enough to frame Ellison. The signature line, though partially redacted, would have shown her name as the commanding officer if fully revealed. During the testimony, the defense called Alan Myers, identified as a former consultant for quantum shield technologies. The man spoke with practiced ease about security protocols and company policies, explaining why Ellison couldn't possibly have accessed the materials in question. The architecture simply doesn't allow for that kind of extraction, Myers testified smoothly. Mr. Ellison would have needed access codes he simply didn't possess. Zariah's pen moved rapidly across her notebook. She knew Myers was lying. The security architecture he described wasn't what Quantum Shield actually used. She had studied their systems during her mission preparations. The witness was planting false information, but why would the defense present testimony that could be so easily disproven, unless someone wanted Ellison to lose? During the lunch recess, Zariah excused herself to the restroom. Alone in the stall, she closed her eyes as a memory crashed over her like a tidal wave. The extraction had gone wrong from the start. Intelligence had promised minimal resistance, but her team faced heavy gunfire within minutes of infiltration. Through night vision goggles, Zariah watched as Rivera took a bullet to the shoulder, then Anderson fell. Comms filled with shouting and gunfire. "They knew we were coming," Monroe yelled through the static. "This is a setup." Zariah tried to coordinate an emergency evacuation, but enemy forces had surrounded their position. One by one, her team members fell, Cooper, then Jackson. Only Monroe and she remained, pinned down in an abandoned building. "Captain, we need to abort," Monroe urged, blood streaming from a gash on his forehead. "Not without the package," Zariah insisted, thinking of the intelligence they'd been sent to retrieve. Proof of a rogue military operation selling weapons technology to hostile actors. The last thing she remembered was the explosion that collapsed the building's eastern wall, the searing pain as debris crushed her leg, and the certainty that she had led her team into a death trap. The memory faded as Zariah splashed cold water on her face. Looking in the mirror, she saw not the quiet juror in a hoodie, but the captain who had lost everything because someone on the inside had betrayed them. When she returned home that evening, a manila envelope waited in her mailbox. No return address, no postmark. Inside was a black and white photograph of her SEAL team, the official portrait taken before their final mission. Across the image, someone had scrawled in red marker, "Classified." Below it, a typed note read, "Code Black, do not trust court system." Code Black, the highest level alert in special operations, indicating catastrophic security breach and imminent threat to operatives. Zariah moved quickly, gathering essentials into a small backpack. She knew her apartment was likely being watched, maybe even bugged. She left lights on, TV running, and slipped out through the emergency exit, disappearing into the night. At a convenience store 20 blocks away, she purchased a new burner phone and dialed a number from memory. "Hello?" A cautious male voice answered. "Monroe." "It's me." A pause. "Captain? Jesus Christ. Secure line?" "Negative. 2 minutes max." "Understood. They're making moves, aren't they?" "Yes. The mission brief showed up in court today. Modified." Monroe cursed softly. "They're setting up Ellison as the fall guy." "For what?" "For what Black Orchid did. The weapons tech leak wasn't Ellison. It was them. Your team found proof, and they buried it along with our people." "Who's they?" "Can't say over this line. But the Admiral knows. He's been protecting you by keeping you off the radar." "Which Admiral?" "Parnell, the one who—" The line suddenly went dead. Zariah discarded the phone immediately, dropping it into a storm drain. Admiral Parnell, her former commanding officer, the man who had personally overseen her medical discharge after the mission. The man who had looked her in the eye and told her the mission records were sealed for national security. The next morning, Zariah arrived at the courthouse earlier than usual. The limping veteran was already there, waiting near the entrance. As she approached, he didn't look at her directly. "Ghost protocol initiated," he murmured as she passed. 48 hours. Ghost protocol, the contingency plan for compromised operatives. 48 hours until extraction or elimination. Inside the jury room, the atmosphere had shifted. Word had spread about Ellison's company being linked to military contracts, and speculation ran wild. "I heard the whole thing is about some secret government program," one juror whispered. Todd seized on the gossip. "This is exactly why we need to focus only on the evidence presented in court. All this conspiracy talk is ridiculous." For the first time since the trial began, Zariah directly challenged him. "Is it conspiracy when the evidence doesn't add up? When witnesses contradict established facts? When documents appear that shouldn't exist?" The room fell silent. Todd's face reddened. Well, look who suddenly has opinions. Decided the case is simple enough for you now? The case isn't simple, Zariah replied, her voice stronger than anyone had heard before. It's being simplified intentionally. Ask yourself why a tech CEO would risk everything to steal technology his company already had access to through legitimate contracts. Margot scoffed. Oh, please. Are you an expert in corporate espionage now? No, Zariah answered calmly. But I know what a cover-up looks like. The deliberation that followed was heated. Todd and Margot pushed for early consensus toward guilt, while Zariah systematically dismantled their arguments with precise logic and technical knowledge that surprised everyone. Sarah backed her on several points, adding credibility to Zariah's position. By day's end, reporters gathered outside were buzzing with a new angle. Unnamed sources suggested the Ellison case might be connected to a classified military operation gone wrong. The speculation had begun to shift from corporate espionage to government cover-up. As jurors departed through a side entrance, Zariah noticed a familiar black town car pulling up to the courthouse's main entrance. A distinguished older man in a naval dress uniform stepped out, flanked by aides. Admiral Parnell, his chest adorned with medals and ribbons that spoke of decades of distinguished service. Zariah ducked her head and moved quickly in the opposite direction. Parnell's presence confirmed what she had suspected. This trial had become much bigger than James Ellison. Halfway to the subway station, Zariah spotted the red dot of a laser sight dancing briefly across her hand. She didn't break stride. Didn't look around frantically. Instead, she calmly stepped into a passing crowd of tourists, changing direction and disappearing into the flow of pedestrians. The warning was clear. Someone had her in their crosshairs. And they were letting her know. The headline appeared on every news site by morning. Courthouse tragedy. Clerk found dead in stairwell fall. The article detailed how Martin Green, a court clerk for the Southern District, had apparently fallen down a service stairwell after working late. Police called it a tragic accident. Zariah knew better. Green was the clerk who had reacted to her military symbol, the one who had seemed frightened after she requested the visitor logs. His death was no accident. The courthouse hummed with shocked whispers as staff and jurors arrived. Security had been doubled, with officers checking IDs and bags more thoroughly than before. Terrible thing about that clerk, Sarah murmured as she sat beside Zariah. Did you know him? We spoke once, Zariah replied carefully. He seemed nervous. About what? Before Zariah could answer, a court officer approached. Juror number 12. There's been a reassignment of court personnel for security reasons. Your bailiff escort has been changed. The new bailiff, a square-jawed man with cold eyes, stood nearby. When he looked at Zariah, there was no warmth, no recognition, only calculated assessment. The bailiff who had slipped her the warning note was gone. During testimony that morning, James Ellison himself took the stand. The CEO appeared haggard, with dark circles under his eyes and a slight tremor in his hands. As his attorney questioned him about security protocols, Zariah studied his body language. He wasn't just nervous. He was terrified. Mr. Ellison, his lawyer asked, did you ever access the classified files mentioned in the indictment? No, Ellison replied firmly. I never had the clearance level required, nor the need. Our company worked on the commercial applications only, not the military implementations. When the prosecutor cross-examined him, she produced emails suggesting he had requested higher security clearance months before the alleged breach. I requested it for a different project entirely, Ellison insisted. A domestic cybersecurity initiative that required government oversight. Claire Whitman smiled thinly. How convenient. During the lunch break, Zariah received another text on her second burner phone. Admiral wants contact. Safe house ready. Confirm. She hesitated, then replied. Negative. Compromised. Need proof of loyalty. After court adjourned for the day, Zariah took a circuitous route home, doubling back several times to ensure she wasn't followed. When she finally reached her apartment building, instinct made her pause before entering. Something felt wrong. Instead of using the main entrance, She circled to the fire escape and climbed to her floor, peering through her window before entering. The apartment appeared untouched, exactly as she had left it. But it wasn't. The books on her shelf were aligned at slightly different angles. The kitchen drawer was closed completely. She always left it open a quarter inch. Her seal medal, hidden in a hollow space beneath the floorboard, was missing. Someone had searched her place with professional precision. They knew exactly what they were looking for. Zariah gathered essential items quickly: a change of clothes, emergency cash, identification documents, and left. She wouldn't be returning. At a small motel on the outskirts of Queens, she paid cash for a room and finally allowed herself to process the day's events: the clerk's death, the missing bailiff, her apartment being searched. The noose was tightening. She closed her eyes, trying to piece together the fragments of truth she'd gathered. Another memory surfaced: the day of her discharge from the Navy. Admiral Parnell sat across from her in the sterile hospital room, his face grave as he placed a folder on her bed. "Captain Cole, I'm afraid your injuries make field operations impossible going forward. The Navy is prepared to offer you an honorable discharge with full benefits." Zariah, her legs still in traction, looked at the papers. "And my team, sir?" "Listed as killed in action during a classified operation. Their families will receive all due benefits and honors." "And the mission findings?" Parnell's expression hardened. "Sealed by presidential order, national security. Sir, with respect, what we found is no longer your concern, Captain." He slid a document across to her. "This non-disclosure agreement is a condition of your discharge. You will never speak of the operation, its objectives, or its outcomes." As she signed, she noticed the shame in Parnell's eyes. He was following orders, but he didn't believe in them. Zariah's phone buzzed, pulling her back to the present. Another text from Monroe. "Channel 5 News now." She turned on the small TV in her motel room. A reporter stood outside the courthouse. "Sources close to the investigation have revealed that the Ellison espionage case may have connections to a classified military program known as Black Orchid. The Department of Defense has declined to comment, but speculation is growing that this trial may involve more than corporate espionage." Zariah turned off the TV. The secrets were beginning to spill. Someone was leaking information, but to what end? Her phone buzzed again. "Meeting set. Tomorrow, 0600, Old Warehouse at Navy Yard. Come alone." This time, the text came with a verification. Code only Monroe and she would know. Their shared deployment date in reverse. The following morning, before dawn, Zariah approached the abandoned warehouse cautiously. She had scouted the location from multiple angles, checking for surveillance or ambush points. Satisfied it was as secure as possible, she slipped inside through a side entrance. Admiral Parnell waited alone in the cavernous space, illuminated by a single industrial light. He wore civilian clothes, a simple gray suit that seemed at odds with his military bearing. "Captain Cole," he said quietly, "it's been a long time." Not long enough, apparently. Zariah remained near the door, wary. "Why am I on that jury, Admiral?" "You weren't supposed to be." He sighed heavily. "The selection algorithm was meant to exclude anyone with connections to military intelligence. Someone overwrote it specifically to place you there." "Who?" "The same people who set up your team 3 years ago. The real Black Orchid operatives." "I thought Black Orchid was a myth, a boogeyman story in special ops." Parnell shook his head. "It began as a legitimate deep cover unit tasked with retrieving stolen American technology from foreign agents. Over time, it evolved, or devolved, into something else. They started selling classified tech to the highest bidders, using their cover to eliminate anyone who discovered their operation." "Like my team." Zariah's voice was flat. "Yes. Your mission that night was to extract evidence of their activities from a foreign broker. They couldn't allow that to happen." "And Ellison? What's his role in this?" "A convenient scapegoat. Ellison's company developed the base encryption that Black Orchid modified for their communications. They planted evidence on his servers, making it appear he was the source of the leaks. So this whole trial is theater." "Yes and no." Parnell stepped closer. Ellison isn't innocent entirely. His company did develop dual-use technology with military applications, but he's not the traitor they're painting him as. He's a pawn, like you were. Why tell me this now? Because Ellison has something they still need. The complete encryption keys that could expose every Black Orchid operation for the past decade. They're hidden somewhere only he knows. Zariah processed this information carefully. So they want a guilty verdict to discredit him and bury the evidence. Precisely. And they want you on that jury. Because if things go sideways, you make the perfect scapegoat. The bitter ex-SEAL with a grudge against the system that left her team behind. The pieces were falling into place, but something still didn't add up. If you know all this, why haven't you gone public? Parnell's expression darkened. Because Black Orchid has protection at the highest levels. Senator Lockhart chairs the Intelligence Committee. He's been their shield for years, burying inquiries and redirecting investigations. Lockhart? The name struck Zariah like a physical blow. Senator William Lockhart had been a vocal advocate for military funding and expansion. His face appeared on news programs weekly, speaking about American security and the threats posed by foreign technology theft. He authorized your mission, Captain. Then he authorized its sabotage. The revelation hit her like a tidal wave. The man responsible for her team's deaths was one of the most powerful figures in Washington. What do you want from me? She asked finally. Help me expose them. Use your position on the jury to keep deliberations going while I gather the final evidence against Lockhart and his Black Orchid operatives. Zariah studied the Admiral's face, looking for deception. And I should trust you, why? Because I'm the one who kept you alive these past 3 years. He reached into his jacket and removed a small flash drive. This contains partial records of Black Orchid operations, enough to raise serious questions but not enough to bring them down. I need Ellison's encryption keys to unlock the rest. Zariah didn't take the drive. If Ellison has these keys, why hasn't he used them as leverage? Because he doesn't know what he has. The keys were embedded in a standard security protocol his company developed. Black Orchid modified it for their own use, but they needed his original architecture. The warehouse fell silent as Zariah weighed her options. Trust the Admiral who had ordered her silence for years? Or continue alone against forces that had already killed everyone close to her? I need time to verify this, she said finally. We don't have time, Captain. The clerk's death was just the beginning. They're eliminating loose ends. As if on cue, her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Monroe compromised. Get out now. Zariah's blood ran cold. We need to move. Now. Outside the warehouse, a black SUV screeched to a halt. Men in tactical gear poured out, weapons drawn. Back exit, Parnell urged, already moving. They escaped through a service tunnel moments before the warehouse erupted in gunfire. Emerging, blocks away, they separated without another word. Zariah disappearing into the morning commuter crowd, Parnell into a waiting car. That night, Zariah broke into a secure government archive with Monroe's remote guidance. His voice on the phone was strained, suggesting he was injured but still operational. Security override is Lima 7 Delta 9er, he instructed as she accessed a terminal in the records facility. I'm in, she confirmed, fingers flying across the keyboard. Accessing mission logs now. You'll need to bypass the classified gateway. Use the Admiral's credentials I sent. The screen filled with documents, mission reports, communication logs, operational directives, all bearing the same classification code. Black Orchid. Monroe, I've got it. Evidence of unauthorized weapons technology transfers. Falsified mission. Reports. She paused, breath catching. And the orders to eliminate my team signed by Lockhart himself. Download everything. We need backup copies. Already on it. As the files transferred to an encrypted drive, Zariah discovered something else. A list of jury candidates for the Ellison trial, with her name manually added by someone with high-level access. They didn't just allow me on that jury, she realized. They wanted me there. This whole thing was a trap. For what purpose? Monroe asked. To flush me out, to confirm I didn't have evidence from our mission, and now that they know I'm active again. They'll try to eliminate you permanently, Monroe finished. Get out of there, Captain. Now. Zariah made copies of the most damning documents and sent them anonymously to two investigative journalists known for their integrity and courage, Samantha Wright at the Washington Post and Michael Bennett at Reuters. She included just enough information to pique their interest without revealing her identity. The following morning, as the trial resumed, tension filled the courtroom. The judge appeared agitated, constantly checking his phone. Claire Whitman seemed distracted, conferring urgently with her assistants between testimonies. During the defense's presentation, Zariah made her move. As a technical expert testified about encryption protocols, she raised her hand, something no juror had done throughout the trial. Judge Brennan frowned. Juror 12, this is highly irregular. I have a question about the evidence, Your Honor, Zariah said calmly. The encryption signature shown on Exhibit C doesn't match the standard for Quantum Shield's commercial protocols. The courtroom fell, silent. Claire Whitman's face drained of color. Jurors don't question witnesses directly, the judge admonished. Then I'm questioning the validity of the evidence itself, Zariah continued, standing now. This document shows military-grade encryption that was modified from the original civilian architecture. Mr. Ellison's company created the base protocol, but someone else weaponized it. Sit down immediately, Judge Brennan ordered, banging his gavel. The real question, Zariah pressed on, is who had access to both the civilian technology and the classified military applications? Who could bridge those worlds? Bailiff, remove this juror, the judge commanded. As the new bailiff approached, the courtroom doors opened. Admiral Parnell entered in full dress uniform, his authority filling the space. Behind him stood two naval intelligence officers and a woman Zariah recognized as the Inspector General for the Department of Defense. The bailiff hesitated, looking between the judge and the admiral. Parnell's voice cut through the chaos. This proceeding is now under review by the Department of Defense for national security implications. Judge Brennan sputtered. You have no jurisdiction here, Admiral. I have every jurisdiction when it concerns classified operations and the subversion of justice. Parnell's eyes found Zariah. Captain Cole, stand down. A collective gasp rippled through the courtroom. Todd's mouth fell open. Margot dropped her pen. The other jurors stared in disbelief. Captain? Todd whispered incredulously. The courtroom erupted in confusion and questions. Reporters scrambled for their phones. The prosecutor demanded order. Through it all, Zariah stood perfectly still, her hoodie finally falling back to reveal the face of a woman who had carried too many secrets for too long. The trap had sprung, but not as her enemies had planned. Silence dropped over the courtroom like a heavy blanket. For several heartbeats, no one moved as the weight of Admiral Parnell's words settled into the collective consciousness. Captain Cole, stand down. Todd Wilson's face had transformed from smug certainty to stunned disbelief. Beside him, Margot. Fairchild sat frozen, her manicured hand suspended midair where she'd been about to jot another dismissive note. Sarah, the retired teacher, was the only juror who didn't look completely shocked. Instead, a small smile of vindication played at the corners of her mouth. Zariah stood perfectly still at the center of the storm, her hoodie now falling loosely around her shoulders. The transformation was subtle but profound. Her posture shifted almost imperceptibly, shoulders squared, chin lifted. She hadn't changed clothes or put on a uniform, but somehow everyone could suddenly see the military officer that had been there all along. This proceeding is temporarily suspended, Judge Brennan announced, his gavel cracking against the sound block with unnecessary force. Counsel and security personnel to my chambers immediately. Everyone else remained seated, as the judge, attorneys, Admiral Parnell, and security officers filed toward the judge's chambers. Reporters in the gallery scrambled for their phones. The courtroom buzzed with whispered conversations and furious typing. Todd leaned across the jury box toward Zariah. Captain, you're a military captain? His voice wavered between accusation and bewilderment. Zariah didn't answer. Her focus remained on the defendant, James Ellison, who was staring at her with a strange mixture of hope and terror. 20 minutes of chaos followed. Court officers struggled to maintain order as journalists pushed for details, and spectators debated what they'd just witnessed. Finally, the judge's door opened, and the parties emerged. Judge Brennan's face was ashen. "This court will recess until tomorrow morning at 9 a.m., he announced. Jurors are instructed not to discuss these proceedings or today's events with anyone. The media is reminded that jury anonymity protocols remain in effect. As Zariah stood to leave with the other jurors, Admiral Parnell approached her directly. "Captain Cole, you'll be coming with me," he said, his voice leaving no room for argument. She nodded once, then turned to the other jurors. "I apologize for the deception," she said simply. It was the most they'd heard her speak throughout the entire trial. Outside the courthouse, chaos reigned. News vans lined the street, and reporters shouted questions as Zariah emerged with Admiral Parnell. She pulled her hoodie back over her head, not out of shame but habit. The instinct to protect her identity still strong. "Admiral, is Juror 12 really a Navy SEAL? Captain Cole, why were you on this jury? Is the Ellison trial connected to classified military operations?" The questions came from all directions, but Zariah and Parnell moved through the crowd without answering, sliding into a waiting black SUV with government plates. As they pulled away, Zariah noticed Margot standing at the courthouse steps, looking lost and confused. Their eyes met briefly through the tinted window. For once, the socialite's face showed no condescension, only a dawning realization of how wrong she had been. Inside a secure conference room at the Naval Operations Support Center, Zariah faced down 3 stern-faced officers from Naval Intelligence, the DoD Inspector General, and Admiral Parnell. The room was swept for bugs, phones were banned, and a white noise machine hummed in the corner. "Captain Cole," began Commander Hayes, a razor-thin woman with steel-gray hair. "You violated multiple non-disclosure agreements, accessed classified information without authorization, and potentially compromised an ongoing federal trial. Do you have anything to say in your defense?" Zariah's response was measured. "I was placed on that jury deliberately, against protocol. Someone wanted me there to either frame me or eliminate me. Either way, I acted to protect myself and expose the truth about Black Orchid." "Black Orchid doesn't exist in any official capacity," interjected Lieutenant Commander Walsh, a bureaucrat with thinning hair and nervous hands. "That's exactly the problem," Zariah replied. "It operates without oversight, without accountability, and it's responsible for the deaths of my SEAL team." The evidence you stole," Walsh interrupted. "The evidence I recovered," Zariah corrected firmly, "proves that Senator Lockhart authorized both our original mission and its sabotage. Black Orchid has been selling classified weapons technology to foreign interests while framing others for the leaks." Admiral Parnell finally spoke up. "I've reviewed Captain Cole's findings. They align with concerns I've had for years about unauthorized operations. That's why I brought in the Inspector General." Sandra Reeves, the DoD Inspector General, had been silent until now. "Captain Cole, while your methods were unorthodox, the information you've provided is concerning enough to warrant a full investigation. However, that doesn't excuse your actions. With respect, ma'am, I watched my entire team die because they found evidence of Black Orchid's activities. I was silenced with classification orders and NDAs. What would you have done?" The room fell quiet as Reeves considered this. "I understand your position, Captain, but we have procedures for a reason." "Those procedures were weaponized against me," Zariah replied. "Against Ellison, too. He's being framed to cover up Black Orchid's actual security breaches." Commander Hayes looked to Parnell. "What do you recommend, Admiral?" "Captain Cole remains under my direct supervision while we investigate these claims. The trial is compromised. We need to address that immediately, and we need protection for Cole. If Black Orchid is real, they'll come for her now that her cover is blown." Outside the conference room, the world was already reacting. News outlets ran with the sensational story. Hero Navy SEAL hidden among jurors in espionage trial. Social media exploded with speculation and debate. Some hailed Zariah, as a whistleblower exposing corruption. Others accused her of grandstanding or undermining the justice system. Back at the courthouse, Judge Brennan had ordered all jurors sequestered at a local hotel, away from the media frenzy. In a private room, the remaining jurors processed the shocking revelation. "I can't believe we never knew," one juror said, shaking his head. "I thought she was—" Margot trailed off, unable to finish the sentence. "Stupid, uneducated, beneath you." Sarah filled in sharply. "Maybe next time you'll think twice before judging someone based on their clothes or how much they talk." Todd paced the room, agitated. "This is insane. She lied to all of us, to the court. She had an agenda the whole time. Did she?" Sarah challenged. "Or was she just paying attention when the rest of you were too busy showing off how smart you thought you were?" The following morning, while journalists camped outside the courthouse, Zariah returned to her apartment with a military escort. The place had been thoroughly searched again, this time officially by naval intelligence, and cleared for her temporary use. As she packed essential items, Zariah found a small black feather on her windowsill, a calling card she recognized immediately. Monroe had been here. He was alive and watching. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Hotel Westbridge, room 412, 1 hour, bring no one." After ensuring she wasn't followed, Zariah made her way to the hotel, a mid-range establishment that catered to business travelers. She took the service stairs to the 4th floor and approached room 412 cautiously. Inside, she found Margot Fairchild sitting nervously on the edge of the bed. "You?" Zariah couldn't hide her surprise. "Please close the door," Margot said, her usual haughtiness replaced by genuine fear. "I need to talk to you." Zariah remained standing, body positioned to allow quick exit if needed. "How did you get my number?" "I didn't send any text," Margot replied, confusion crossing her face. "I was told to wait here for you, by him." She nodded toward the bathroom. The bathroom door opened, and Monroe stepped out, tall, scarred, and vigilant. Unlike the Monroe of Zariah's memories, this version moved with a slight limp and had a long scar running from his left temple to his jaw. "Captain," he nodded. "Sorry for the theatrics, but we need to talk, and I needed to know if Mrs. Fairchild here was telling the truth." "About what?" Zariah asked, still wary. Margot's composure cracked. "My father," she said, voice shaking. "He's involved in all this. The company on trial, Quantum Shield. He was an early investor. He made millions when they secured their first government contracts." "That's a conflict of interest," Zariah noted. "You should never have been on that jury." "I know," Margot admitted. "I was placed there. They told me to push for a guilty verdict, to influence the others. They said it was a matter of national security." "Who is they?" Monroe asked sharply. "A man who works with my father. He's connected to someone in Washington, a senator, I think." "Lockhart," Zariah and Monroe said simultaneously. Margot nodded. "After what happened yesterday, I started putting pieces together. When I called my father to ask questions, he told me to say nothing and wait for instructions. Then I got a call telling me to come to this hotel." Her eyes filled with tears. "I think my father may be involved in something terrible." Monroe handed Zariah a tablet. "This came in an hour ago. Your little media bomb worked." On screen was a news article from the Washington Post. The headline read, "Classified documents suggest covert military group operating without oversight." The article, written by Samantha Wright, referenced anonymous sources and leaked documents, pointing to unauthorized operations conducted by a group called Black Orchid, potentially tied to weapons technology theft. "They're running with it," Zariah said, relief evident in her voice. "Not just them," Monroe replied, swiping to another screen. "Reuters has a parallel investigation going. They're focusing on Senator Lockhart's connections to defense contractors, including my father's investment firm," Margot finished quietly. Zariah studied the socialite carefully. "Why are you telling us this? You could have stayed quiet." Margot looked down at her hands. "Because you were right about everything, and I was horrible to you. I treated you like you were—" She couldn't finish. "Beneath you," Zariah supplied without emotion. Yes, Margot admitted. And now I find out my family might be connected to people who killed your friends. I may be a lot of things, Captain Cole, but I'm not a traitor. The moment was interrupted by Zariah's secure phone ringing, the one provided by Naval Intelligence. It was Admiral Parnell. Cole, we've got a problem. Someone's trying to shut down the investigation before it starts. Senator Lockhart has called an emergency closed-door session of the Intelligence Committee. They're claiming national security, privilege to bury everything. We need to move faster, Zariah replied. I'm with Monroe now. We have Margot Fairchild too. She's talking. Bring them in, both of them. And Cole, watch your back. There's been unusual activity around the courthouse. I think they're making a play. As they prepared to leave, Zariah received a text with an image attachment. It was a photograph of her SEAL team's memorial wall at Naval Special Warfare Command, with the words "Traitors die twice" superimposed across it. The Black Orchid signature was clear. They were sending a message and upping the psychological warfare. Zariah showed Monroe the image. His face hardened. They're desperate. That means we're close. Close to what? Margot asked. The truth, Zariah replied. And that's what makes us dangerous. The next 48 hours unfolded like a high-stakes chess match, while Senator Lockhart maneuvered in Washington to discredit the emerging Black Orchid allegations. Zariah, Monroe, and Admiral Parnell worked to consolidate their evidence and protect their witnesses. Margot Fairchild, now under naval protection, provided crucial information about her father's financial ties to quantum shield technologies. Naval intelligence confirmed that BlackRock Investments, where Richard Fairchild served as managing partner, had channeled funds through shell companies to several defense contractors linked to Black Orchid operations. At the Secure Operations Center established in a nondescript office building, Monroe spread documents across a table as Zariah and Admiral Parnell reviewed them. This is everything I could salvage from our original mission, Monroe explained, pointing to encrypted communications. And financial records. It's not complete. Most of it was lost in the ambush, but it confirms that Black Orchid was selling modified versions of Quantum Shield's encryption to foreign entities while maintaining backdoor access. The perfect intelligence operation. Parnell nodded grimly. Sell compromised security systems to your targets, then exploit the vulnerabilities. But Ellison didn't know, Zariah added. His company created the base technology legitimately. Black Orchid modified it without his knowledge, then framed him when they needed a scapegoat. Monroe pulled up another file on his laptop. I tracked down the original contract between Quantum Shield and the Department of Defense. Look who authorized it. The document showed Senator Lockhart's signature as committee chair, approving the initial funding. He's been running this from the beginning, Zariah realized. Creating the technology through legitimate channels, weaponizing it through Black Orchid, then selling it for profit while maintaining intelligence advantages. And eliminating anyone who discovered the operation, Monroe added darkly. Like our team. Admiral Parnell's secure phone rang. After a brief conversation, his expression tightened. That was Commander Hayes. They found something in Alaska, a survivor from your operation. Zariah and Monroe exchanged shocked glances. Who? Monroe demanded. Marcus Reynolds, codename Rex. He's been living off-grid in a cabin outside Anchorage for 3 years. Naval Intelligence picked him up this morning. Zariah felt the blood drain from her face. Rex is alive? How is that possible? We saw him take a direct hit. Apparently he was wounded, but managed to escape during the chaos. He's been in hiding, afraid Black Orchid would finish the job if they knew he survived. Does he have evidence? Monroe asked urgently. Better, Parnell replied. He has the original intelligence package you were sent to retrieve, proof of Black Orchid's unauthorized weapons technology transfers. He kept it as insurance. This development changed everything. With Rex's evidence and testimony, combined with what they had already assembled, they could finally expose the entire operation. Meanwhile, in the judicial system, the Ellison trial had erupted into chaos. Judge Brennan reluctantly declared a mistrial after Zariah's revelation as a former SEAL captain and the subsequent allegations of military interference. Defense attorneys filed emergency motions claiming government misconduct and demanding all charges be dropped. The prosecution, led by Claire Whitman, found itself in an impossible position. As evidence of Black Orchid's existence leaked to the press, her carefully constructed case against Ellison began to crumble. In a dramatic development, Whitman herself requested access to classified materials related to Black Orchid, suggesting she might have been misled about the true nature of the case. On the third morning after the courtroom revelation, Zariah was preparing for a secure video conference with Rex when her phone buzzed with an alert. Breaking news notifications flooded in. Senator Lockhart calls press conference to address malicious allegations against military honor. He's going on offense, Monroe observed grimly. Classic move. Deny everything and attack the accusers. Zariah watched the live stream as Senator William Lockhart, resplendent in a tailored suit with an American flag pin prominently displayed, stood before a forest of microphones. His silver hair and distinguished bearing projected authority and patriotism. "My fellow Americans," he began, voice resonating with practiced sincerity, "I come before you today to address troubling allegations that have emerged regarding a so-called covert military unit named Black Orchid. Let me be absolutely clear. These allegations are not only false but represent a dangerous attempt to undermine our national security and military readiness." He continued, voice hardening with righteous indignation. "The individuals behind these fabrications include a dishonorably discharged former Navy officer with a history of mental health issues following combat trauma and a naval administrator seeking to cover up his own negligence. Their claims have no basis in fact and serve only to aid our adversaries." Zariah's hands clenched into fists. The deliberate mischaracterization of her discharge status and the implication of mental instability were calculated blows designed to discredit her before she could even testify. "That son of a bitch," Monroe muttered. "This is good," Admiral Parnell said unexpectedly. Both Zariah and Monroe turned to him in surprise. "He's scared," Parnell explained. "He wouldn't address this publicly if he wasn't worried about what we have. And now he's committed to specific lies that we can disprove." Zariah nodded slowly. "He claimed I was dishonorably discharged. My service records prove otherwise." "Exactly," Parnell agreed. "He's making mistakes. We need to press the advantage." The answer came in an unexpected form. As Senator Lockhart concluded his press conference and began taking questions, a reporter from the Washington Post stood up. "Senator, I have here documents indicating you personally authorized Operation Silverfish in March 3 years ago, a mission that resulted in the deaths of 4 Navy SEALs. Can you comment on your involvement and why these deaths were classified? At the highest level?" The camera caught Lockhart's momentary flash of panic before his political training reasserted itself. "I'm not at liberty to discuss classified operations, but I can assure you that any mission I authorize is in the national interest and conducted with the utmost care for our service members." Another reporter jumped in. "Senator, sources claim you've received over $12 million in campaign contributions from defense contractors directly benefiting from technology sales to foreign entities. Does this represent a conflict of interest in your position on the Intelligence Committee?" The press conference spiraled rapidly out of control as journalists, clearly armed with leaked information, hammered Lockhart with increasingly specific questions about Black Orchid, weapons technology transfers, and financial connections to shell companies. Watching the senator's composure crack, Zariah felt a grim satisfaction. "The reporters got our packages." "Not just got them, they're coordinating," Monroe observed. "Look at how they're building on each other's questions. Someone's organizing this." Admiral Parnell's phone chimed with a message. After reading it, he looked up with a rare smile. That would be Inspector General Reeves. She decided Lockhart needed to face some preliminary questions from the press before her official investigation concludes. While Lockhart struggled to contain the damage, the legal system continued its process. The judge overseeing the Ellison case called an emergency hearing to address the mounting evidence of government misconduct. During this hearing, a bombshell dropped. Claire Whitman, the lead prosecutor, requested to withdraw from the case. "Your Honor," she stated, standing ramrod straight before the bench, Information has come to light suggesting that I may have been provided incomplete or misleading evidence by certain government agencies. In the interest of justice, I cannot in good conscience continue to prosecute this case until these serious allegations are resolved. The judge, clearly stunned, had little choice but to accept her withdrawal and order a complete review of all evidence. Ellison, for the first time since his arrest, allowed himself a glimmer of hope. That afternoon, Zariah received an unexpected request. James Ellison wanted to meet with her privately, with his attorney present. After consulting with Admiral Parnell and getting clearance from the court, she agreed. The meeting took place in a secure conference room at the Federal Building. Ellison looked dramatically different from the defeated man who had sat at the defense table. Though still stressed, his eyes held clarity and purpose. "Captain Cole," he began, after introductions were complete, "I want to thank you for what you've done. I had no idea what was really happening until my attorney explained. Your allegations about Black Orchid." "Mr. Ellison," Zariah responded carefully, "I need to understand exactly what you knew about how your encryption technology was being used by military contractors." Ellison nodded solemnly. "Our company developed quantum-resistant encryption for commercial applications. We were approached about military contracts which we accepted under strict ethical guidelines. What we didn't know was that someone had modified our protocols for unauthorized purposes." "When did you first suspect something was wrong?" "About 6 months ago. One of my engineers noticed anomalies in how our systems were being implemented in certain classified projects. When he brought this to my attention, I began quietly investigating. 3 weeks later, federal agents raided my offices and arrested me for espionage." This timeline aligned perfectly with what Zariah had pieced together. Ellison had started pulling on threads that threatened to unravel the entire Black Orchid operation, so they framed him to maintain their cover. "Mr. Ellison," Zariah leaned forward, "we have reason to believe your original encryption architecture contains keys that could help us decrypt Black Orchid's communications, keys they need to maintain their operation." Ellison exchanged glances with his attorney, then nodded. "The quantum bridge protocols. They're based on a mathematical sequence I developed personally. No one else has the complete formula. That's why they needed you discredited, but not eliminated." Zariah realized. "They still need your knowledge." "They used me like they used you," Ellison said quietly. "But you still have your soul." The cryptic statement hung in the air between them. Zariah sensed there was more Ellison wasn't saying, perhaps couldn't say in this setting. As she left the meeting, her secure phone buzzed with a text from Monroe. "It's time. Tomorrow you'll have your shot. Don't miss." The message came with these coordinates for a location in Washington, D.C., and a time, 0900 hours. Monroe had arranged for her to testify before a closed session of the House Oversight Committee, a chance to present their evidence directly to legislators who could hold Lockhart accountable. That night, as Zariah prepared her testimony in her temporary quarters at the naval base, Admiral Parnell visited her. "You've started something that can't be stopped now," he said, settling heavily into a chair. "Lockhart is calling in every favor, threatening everyone who might listen to you. But the media coverage has forced too many questions into the open." "Will it be enough?" Zariah asked, the weight of her dead teammates heavy on her shoulders. "That depends on what happens tomorrow. The committee chairman is no friend of Lockhart's, but he's cautious. You'll need to be precise, factual, and unimpeachable." "I've been preparing my whole life for this mission, Admiral." Parnell nodded soberly. "I know. I just want you to understand the forces aligned against you. Black Orchid isn't just Lockhart. It's a network of influential people protecting their interests, people who believe they're above the law because they write it." "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I need you to understand what victory looks like here. It's not about destroying everyone involved. That's impossible. It's about exposing enough truth that they can never operate in shadows again." As Parnell left, Zariah returned to her preparations. She organized her evidence methodically: mission logs, financial records, witness testimonies, technical analyses of the modified encryption. The case against Black Orchid was circumstantial in places, but devastating in its totality. She was about to turn in when her burner phone, the one only Monroe knew about, buzzed with a message. Extraction team compromised. Change of plans. Meet at secondary location at 0700. Bring all evidence. A chill ran through her. The message used their established protocol but felt wrong somehow. She texted back, "Confirm authentication?" The response came quickly. Sierra Echo Alpha Lima. Zariah frowned. That wasn't their authentication code. It was close. The letters spelled SEAL, but their actual code was based on their first deployment date. Someone was impersonating Monroe. She immediately contacted Admiral Parnell through the secure line. "Sir, we have a breach. Someone's compromised. Monroe's communications or is impersonating him." "Where are you?" Parnell demanded. "Secure quarters. Building 7. Stay there. I'm sending a security team. We'll move you to a different location." Zariah gathered her evidence and prepared for immediate evacuation. As she worked, her mind raced through possibilities. If they could compromise Monroe's communications, what else might they access? Who could she trust? The answer came sooner than expected. Her room phone rang, an internal line that should have been secure. "Captain Cole," a voice she didn't recognize spoke when she answered. "Listen carefully. This base has been compromised. 5 minutes ago, Admiral Parnell was detained by military police on orders from Washington. They're coming for you next." "Who is this?" Zariah demanded. "A friend of Monroe's. You need to leave now. Take only what's essential. There's a maintenance exit on the east side of your building. A blue Ford will be waiting. The driver will identify himself with the words, 'The orchid grows in darkness.'" The line went dead. Zariah moved with practiced efficiency, securing only the most critical evidence and a weapon. Years of special operations training had prepared her for exactly this scenario. Trust no one, move fast, verify everything. As promised, a blue Ford waited at the maintenance exit. The driver, a young man with military bearing, rolled down the window as she approached cautiously. "The orchid grows in darkness," he said quietly. "Monroe sent me. We need to move now." As Zariah slipped into the car, alarms began blaring across the base. The trap had been sprung, but this time, she was one step ahead. "Where's Monroe?" she asked as they drove through a service gate, the driver showing credentials that got them waved through without inspection. "Meeting you at the safe house. And Captain, he has Rex with him." Zariah felt a surge of hope. With Rex's testimony and the evidence they'd gathered, tomorrow's hearing could still happen. Black Orchid's days of operating in shadows were numbered. They drove through the night. Zariah thought of her fallen teammates, of Todd's sneering dismissal and Margot's condescension, of the quiet strength she'd maintained throughout her ordeal. The woman in the hoodie had revealed herself as Captain Cole, and now Captain Cole would finish the mission her team had started 3 years ago. Dawn broke over Washington, D.C. with a crimson intensity that seemed to herald the day's coming storm. Zariah stood at the window of the safe house, a modest apartment in Alexandria, with reinforced doors and windows that didn't appear on any official records. The dark circles under her eyes betrayed her sleepless night, but her gaze remained focused and determined. Behind her, Monroe and Rex sat at a kitchen table covered with documents, laptops, and empty coffee cups. Rex, Marcus Reynolds, was thinner than Zariah remembered, his once broad frame whittled down by years of hiding and hypervigilance. The scar across his neck where a bullet had grazed him during their ambushed mission stood out against his pale skin. "Transport's confirmed for 0800, Monroe announced, hanging up a burner phone. "We'll take separate routes to the capital. Zariah first, then Rex, then me." Rex nodded grimly. "Assuming we make it there at all, Lockhart's people will be watching every approach. That's why we're using congressional security, not our own." "People," Monroe replied. "The committee chairman has authorized a direct escort from a secure pickup point." Zariah turned from the window. "Do we have confirmation that Admiral Parnell is safe?" "Limited," Monroe admitted. "He's being held at Naval Support Facility Anacostia, officially for security debriefing. Unofficially, they're keeping him isolated until after your testimony." The weight of responsibility pressed down on Zariah's shoulders. Everything now hinged on her testimony, Not just justice for her fallen teammates, but Parnell's freedom, Ellison's exoneration, and the exposure of a corruption that had wormed its way into the highest levels of government. "Time to move," she said, gathering the secure evidence case. "Stick to the plan. If anything goes wrong, we adapt," Rex finished. "Just like always, Captain." Zariah nodded, momentarily transported back to missions where these men had trusted her with their lives. Now, they were trusting her again, perhaps for the last time. The morning sun had barely cleared the horizon when Zariah left the safe house, dressed in civilian clothes with her evidence case handcuffed to her wrist. She walked 3 blocks before catching a rideshare driven by a retired Marine who'd been vetted by Monroe's network. The car had just turned onto the George Washington Memorial Parkway when Zariah noticed a black SUV merge aggressively into traffic behind them. "We've got a tail," she said calmly to the driver. 2 cars back, black Suburban. The driver checked his mirror and nodded. "I see him. Hold tight." He executed a sudden exit, then an immediate re-entry onto the parkway in the opposite direction. The SUV attempted to follow but was blocked by a delivery truck that seemed to appear at just the right moment. "Friend of yours?" Zariah asked, noting the precision of the maneuver. "Monroe called in some favors," the driver replied with a tight smile. "Half the vets in the district are watching your back today, Captain." They switched vehicles twice more before reaching the secure pickup point, a nondescript parking garage where 2 stern-faced Capitol police officers waited beside an unmarked sedan. After verifying Zariah's identity, they escorted her through a service entrance into the labyrinthine underbelly of the Capitol complex. Congressman Daniel Lawrence, chairman of the House Oversight Committee, met her in a secure anteroom. In his 60s, with a shock of white hair and penetrating blue eyes, Lawrence had the bearing of a man accustomed to power, but not corrupted by it. "Captain Cole," he greeted her, extending his hand. "Thank you for coming. I understand the considerable risk you're taking." "Thank you for the opportunity, Congressman," Zariah replied. "Has the committee been briefed on the classified nature of my testimony?" "Yes. We've established a SCIF protocol for today's hearing. No recording devices, no staff except those with appropriate clearance." He paused, his expression grave. "I should warn you, Senator Lockhart has friends on this committee. They'll challenge everything you say." "I'm counting on it, sir." As they prepared to enter the hearing room, Zariah's secure phone vibrated with an urgent message. Rex intercepted. "Monroe engaging. Proceed as planned." Her heart sank, but her face remained impassive. They had anticipated this possibility, Lockhart trying to neutralize their key witness. It meant she would face the committee alone, at least initially. Chu's hearing room was smaller than she expected, arranged for confidentiality rather than spectacle. 12 committee members sat in a semicircle facing a single witness table. No press, no public gallery, no cameras, just 12 elected representatives, their essential staff, and armed security at every door. As Zariah took her seat, she felt the weight of scrutiny from every direction. Some faces showed open skepticism, others guarded interest. Congressman Lawrence called the classified session to order, explaining the extraordinary circumstances that had brought them together. "Captain Cole," he began formally, "you come before this committee with allegations of serious misconduct involving classified operations, misappropriation of military technology, and possible treason. These are grave charges that demand substantial evidence. Are you prepared to present such evidence today?" "I am, Mr. Chairman." "Then please begin." Zariah unlocked the evidence case and removed a precisely organized set of folders. 3 years ago, I commanded a SEAL team tasked with retrieving intelligence from a foreign location. That intelligence concerned unauthorized weapons technology transfers conducted by a covert unit operating under the designation Black Orchid. She proceeded methodically, laying out the evidence piece by piece. Mission logs, financial records, technical analyses of the modified encryption technology, witness statements. Her presentation was clinical, devoid of emotion, but devastating in its precision. "The operation was compromised before we arrived," she continued. 4 members of my team were killed. The official record states that all intelligence was lost in the ambush. But that's false. Some of it survived, and more has been gathered since. A congressman from Texas leaned forward. Captain Cole, these are serious accusations against distinguished public servants. What proof do you have that Senator Lockhart personally authorized these illegal operations? Zariah removed a final document from her case. This operational directive bearing Senator Lockhart's signature and verification code explicitly authorizes Black Orchid to modify and deploy proprietary encryption technology to designated foreign entities. The same document authorizes containment measures against any personnel who discover the program's true nature. Containment measures meaning what exactly? A congresswoman asked. Assassination, ma'am. The room fell silent as committee members examined copies of the document. Congressman Lawrence cleared his throat. Captain Cole, while this evidence is compelling, Senator Lockhart and his supporters will claim these documents are fabricated or taken out of context. Do you have corroborating testimony? I do, Zariah replied. Former Petty Officer Marcus Reynolds, who survived the same ambush, has the original intelligence package we were sent to retrieve. He was scheduled to appear today but has been, she chose her words carefully, delayed. As if on cue, the hearing room door opened. Monroe entered, supporting a limping but very much alive Rex. Blood stained the right sleeve of Rex's jacket, but his eyes burned with fierce determination. Sorry we're late, Monroe announced calmly. We had to take a detour around an assassination attempt. The committee erupted in shocked exclamations. Security personnel immediately surrounded Rex and Monroe, weapons drawn until Congressman Lawrence ordered them to stand down. What happened? Lawrence demanded. 3-man hit team, Monroe reported professionally. Professional, but not military. Private contractors. They're currently in the custody of Metro Police, those who survived. Rex stepped forward, grimacing through pain. Mr. Chairman, I have information that corroborates everything Captain Cole has presented. I also have the original intelligence package that cost my teammates their lives. For the next hour, Rex and Zariah presented a united front, their testimony interlocking to create an airtight case against Black Orchid and its political protectors. Monroe provided technical expertise on the encryption technology, explaining how Ellison's legitimate work had been weaponized without his knowledge. As the hearing neared its conclusion, Congressman Lawrence addressed Zariah directly. Captain Cole, you've presented compelling evidence of criminal conspiracy at the highest levels. Before we conclude, is there anything else this committee should know? Zariah paused, then spoke from the heart for the first time. Mr. Chairman, this isn't just about classified technology or political corruption. It's about honor. 4 members of my team died because they discovered the truth. They were labeled as casualties of a routine mission, denied the recognition they deserved. Today isn't just about exposing Senator Lockhart's crimes. It's about restoring the honor of those sailors who gave everything for their country. Outside, the Capitol, chaos had erupted. News of the classified hearing had leaked, along with rumors of an attempted assassination of federal witnesses. Reporters swarmed the grounds, demanding information. Social media exploded with speculation and partial information. Senator Lockhart called an emergency press conference, attempting to get ahead of the story. Flanked by supporters, he denounced the hearing as a partisan witch hunt and denied all allegations. Halfway through his prepared statement, federal agents appeared at the back of the room. The lead agent stepped forward, grim-faced, and interrupted. Senator William Lockhart, I have a warrant for your arrest on charges of conspiracy, unauthorized disclosure of classified information, and accessory to murder. The cameras captured every moment as the senator's face contorted in shock, then fury. This is absurd. I'm a United States Senator. Yes, sir, the agent replied calmly, and you have the right to remain silent. As Lockhart was escorted out in handcuffs, the political earthquake his arrest triggered was just beginning. Within hours, federal agents executed simultaneous warrants across Washington, New York, and Virginia, targeting Black Orchid's network of enablers and operatives. That evening, as Zariah watched the news from a secure military facility, Monroe joined her with a tired smile. They're releasing Admiral Parnell, all charges dropped. And Ellison? Prosecutors are filing to dismiss all charges tomorrow morning. He'll be a free man by noon. Zariah nodded, a weight lifting from her shoulders. The others? Monroe understood she meant the jurors. They've been released from sequestration. The media's hounding them for interviews about the seal in the jury box. A small smile touched Zariah's lips. I wonder what Todd Wilson thinks now. Probably kicking himself for every condescending remark, Monroe chuckled. Speaking of which, you've got a visitor. To Zariah's surprise, Margot Fairchild entered the room, looking nothing like the polished socialite from the jury box. Her designer clothes had been replaced by simple jeans and a sweater, her makeup minimal, her bearing humbled. Captain Cole, she began hesitantly, I came to thank you, and to apologize. My father was arrested this morning. He's cooperating with investigators. I'm sorry about your father, Zariah said sincerely. Margot shook her head. Don't be. He made his choices. She took a deep breath. I made choices too, about how I saw you, how I treated you. I was wrong, and I'm deeply sorry. Zariah studied the woman before her, seeing genuine remorse. We all make judgments based on limited information, Mrs. Fairchild. What matters is what we do when we learn the truth. Please call me Margot. She extended her hand. I'd like to start over if that's possible. Zariah accepted the handshake, a small gesture of reconciliation amidst the day's larger victories. Later that night, as Zariah finally allowed herself to rest, her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Mission complete, Captain. They didn't die for nothing. E. She closed her eyes, the faces of her fallen teammates vivid in her memory. For the first time in 3 years, she allowed herself to grieve openly, tears streaming down her face. The woman in the hoodie had completed her final mission. 3 months passed in a whirlwind of investigations, hearings, and media frenzy. The Black Orchid scandal had expanded beyond anyone's expectations, implicating dozens of officials across multiple agencies and exposing a network of corruption that had operated with impunity for nearly a decade. Zariah had testified before 3 congressional committees, 2 federal grand juries, and a military tribunal. Each appearance dragged her further into the public eye, a place she had never sought to be. Her face appeared on magazine covers beneath headlines like The Seal Who Exposed the System and Captain Cole's Quiet Courage. Now, on a crisp autumn morning, she stood before a federal courthouse in her dress blues, preparing to face yet another legal proceeding. This time, however, she was the subject rather than the witness. The Department of Defense had filed charges against her for unauthorized disclosure of classified information and violation of multiple non-disclosure agreements. Admiral Parnell, himself recently cleared of all wrongdoing, approached her on the courthouse steps. Ready for this, Captain? As ready as I'll ever be, sir. Inside, government attorneys presented their case with clinical detachment. Zariah had broken her sworn oaths, violated security protocols, and potentially endangered ongoing operations by exposing Black Orchid. The letter of the law was clear, they argued. Regardless of her intentions, Captain Cole had committed serious breaches of national security. Zariah's attorney countered with an impassioned defense, arguing that her actions were not only justified, but necessary to expose criminal activity hiding behind classification shields. Captain Cole didn't betray her country, he concluded. She honored her deepest oath, to protect America from enemies both foreign and domestic. When the judge asked if she wished to make a statement, Zariah rose and faced the court. Your Honor, I took an oath to defend the Constitution against all enemies. That oath doesn't become void when the threat wears a senator's pin or hides behind classification stamps. I regret nothing except that it took 3 years and the sacrifice of good people to bring this truth to light. Outside the courthouse, public opinion had already rendered its verdict. A crowd of supporters had gathered, many of them veterans wearing their service insignia. Signs reading, "Justice for Captain Cole," and "Truth is not treason," filled the air. What began as a grassroots movement had exploded into a national phenomenon. Betrayal. Justice for Zariah trended across social media platforms. Former SEALs, military mothers, Civil liberties advocates and ordinary citizens rallied to her defense. The movement transcended political lines, uniting people around the principle that truth and integrity must sometimes supersede bureaucratic rules. As Zariah awaited the judge's decision, Admiral Parnell made his own dramatic move. In a televised press conference, he announced his resignation from active duty, effective immediately. For too long, I allowed fear of political consequences to override my duty to the truth and to the men and women under my command, he stated, his voice thick with emotion. Captain Zariah Cole represents the future of military integrity, the courage to stand alone for what's right, regardless of personal cost. I failed her once. I will not fail her again. The Pentagon, sensing the shifting political winds, offered Zariah a deal. All charges would be dropped if she signed another non-disclosure agreement regarding specific operational details of Black Orchid. The document was placed before her in a private meeting room, a government attorney waiting expectantly with pen extended. Zariah read it carefully, then placed the pen down without signing. "I'm done with silence," she said simply, and walked out. 2 weeks later, she received a formal subpoena to testify before a special congressional committee investigating systemic abuses of classification systems. The hearing room was packed, cameras broadcasting the proceedings nationwide. Senator Lockhart, awaiting trial on multiple federal charges, watched from a prison television as Zariah took the stand. Her testimony was raw, emotional, and unforgettable, a first-hand account of how classification had been weaponized to hide crimes and silence whistleblowers. She spoke of her fallen teammates not as abstract heroes but as real people with names, faces, and families who deserved to know the truth. When she finished, even the most skeptical committee members sat in stunned silence. The aftermath was swift and consequential. Congress passed the Military Transparency and Accountability Act, creating new protections for service members who reported wrongdoing and establishing an independent review process for classification decisions. President Harrison signed it into law with Zariah standing behind him, a symbolic acknowledgement of her role in inspiring the reforms. Monroe and Rex, both cleared of all charges related to their assistance in exposing Black Orchid, chose different paths forward. Monroe accepted a position with a cybersecurity firm specializing in protecting whistleblowers. Rex returned to Alaska, preferring the quiet solitude of his cabin to the chaos of public attention. As for Todd Wilson and Margot Fairchild, their stories diverged dramatically. Todd, facing professional backlash after his treatment of Zariah, became public, withdrew from his law firm's partnership track. His last public statement, a grudging acknowledgement that he had misjudged Captain Cole, did little to salvage his reputation. Margot, in contrast, embraced a path of redemption. Following her father's guilty plea to multiple federal charges, she used her inheritance to establish a legal defense fund for whistleblowers facing retaliation. She and Zariah maintained a cautious but genuine friendship, bound by their shared experience of the trial that had changed both their lives. In the aftermath of the scandal, Zariah faced the question that confronts all who suddenly find themselves thrust into the spotlight. What next? Job offers flooded in, from security firms, media outlets, even political campaigns seeking her endorsement. She declined them all. Instead, she founded the Orchid Project, a non-profit dedicated to supporting military whistleblowers and advocating for families of service members killed in classified operations. The organization's mission was simple: ensure that no family ever had to wonder about the truth behind their loved one's sacrifice. On the one-year anniversary of the courtroom revelation that had started it all, Zariah made a pilgrimage to Arlington National Cemetery. There, in Section 60, lay the remains of her team members, Cooper, Rivera, Anderson, and Jackson. She placed a medal on each headstone, their Navy crosses, finally awarded posthumously after the truth about their mission emerged. "I kept my promise," she whispered to the silent stones. "The world knows who you really were." The following morning, Zariah drove alone to a quiet beach on the Maryland shore. The November air was crisp, the beach deserted. She walked to the water's edge, watching as the sun broke through cloud cover to illuminate the horizon. For the first time in years, She felt truly free. Free from secrets, from guilt, from the crushing weight of carrying a truth no one believed. She closed her eyes, breathing in the salt air, allowing memories to wash over her without pain. Her team laughing during training exercises, Monroe's terrible jokes, Rex's quiet competence, the pride she'd felt leading them. The woman in the hoodie was gone, her disguise no longer necessary. Captain Cole remained, her identity restored, her mission complete. And now, finally Zariah could simply be herself. A woman who had faced the impossible and prevailed, not through violence or vengeance, but through an unwavering commitment to truth. As the sun climbed higher, painting the water with golden light, Zariah turned away from the ocean and began walking back toward shore. Her future, uncertain but full of possibility, awaited. What assumptions do you make about the quiet ones in your life, and what hidden strengths might they be concealing? If this story of judgment and revelation moved you, hit like and subscribe for more tales that challenge how we see the world around us.